Hello and welcome. Thank you for joining us. Deer Talk Now podcast is coming at you once again. My name is Daniel Schmidt with Deer and Deer Hunting. We really appreciate you being here. All we ask you to do is like and subscribe. That's all you have to do, whether you're listening to this podcast or watching it on one of the video platforms, YouTube, Facebook, Instagram, etc. Today, another solo well, I don't want to call it a solo podcast because David Gilane, he's Robin.
Yo.
To my Batman. He is with me today. We're going to talk all things blood trailing because, David, this is the time of the year. We are into October, and I know there's deer been hitting the ground all over the place, but we've already been hearing the
Not in front of me.
me either yet. I guess if we count. Sorry about that. If we count Wyoming, we had one on the ground.
Yeah, but not here in Wisconsin. It's about 90 degrees most nights, so a little weird for us, and definitely keeping them hunkered down.
Yeah, but we've heard, some people been out. There's been some success stories.
Some.
Becca Vogel from our office here, she got one on opening day. Another nice bow kill for her. But we've been hearing these typical stories of, I shot a deer, I couldn't find it. What do I need to do? So today's podcast is going to be another all about blood trailing. And we're going to take this from a couple areas of either A, just good information that is a good refresher, or for people who have never done it or don't have a lot of experience, to the guys who have done it a lot, and hopefully we can impart some things in their mind about how to think differently so you increase your success. We had Brian Johnson with us from Anatomy Hunter earlier this summer, and as much as I think I know about blood trailing, my goodness, did he open our eyes, didn't he?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, that guy is a certified genius.
When you look at it, it's all about deer anatomy, and that's what you have to really get in your head about blood trailing, is the anatomy, and really, really study it. And then even when you think you know it all, you get thrown a curveball. So, David, I'm going to have three top 5 lists, sure. And I would just want to play off of each other here as we go through them. So the first one is 5 things we do wrong after we shoot a deer. So I'm going to let you guess one of the first ones.
Guess the first one. I would say
these aren't set in stone either. This is just I scribbled these on a piece of paper.
I mean, I'd say the number one thing would probably be going after the deer when you're not sure of the shot.
Yep, that's it. Well, that's one of them.
Yeah.
And I would put that on my list as number 3 out of 5. So I'll back up and I'll say number 1 is not knowing the basics of what just happened. And when I say that is, where exactly was the deer standing? Exactly how was it standing? And what did it do afterwards? And that's all wrapped into number 1. Mm-hmm. And we saw that in Wyoming after hundreds of deer that I've shot and followed over my life. What did I do wrong?
This year?
Yeah. This year. I'm not going past egregiousness.
Let me think about this year. So this year we had that buck come in at the very last light. You took a shot. We saw him run, and he dipped into a brush line. You thought he went into the brush line about 100 yards, and he actually did. He actually went all the way to the end of the field, so we didn't look far enough.
And that was hard, wasn't it? And he didn't go far.
Right, and we didn't have a blood trail because he just bent. He curved out so much, and we just didn't go that far, and then we couldn't find the arrow either. So I think we looked a little more than we needed or should have without further information because we weren't even in a position, even though we were filming it, to where we could look back at the footage and reassure ourselves of it. So, I think we just went a little too much than we should have without a little more information.
Exactly right. And that's one of the things that and when I say whitetail it's not mine. It's what I've learned from guys like the best blood trailers in the world. John Trout, rest his soul. Charlie Alsheimer, rest his soul. Gary Clancy, rest his soul. Some of the best blood trailers that have ever been have taught me these things, and even after all of these years. So what happened, We have this buck come in. He's coming to a water tank. I shoot, and he does the, in hindsight, I hit him high through the lungs, but he does that peel horseshoe through the field and back the way he came. And what I always say is know exactly where the deer's standing and exactly the last place you saw him. Well, I was off by, 100 yards where I last saw him. He actually disappeared 100 yards past. And it was hard because it was a big center pivot alfalfa field with a hedgerow right next to us. But that's one thing that in the heat of the moment, we really get excited. We know we made the shot, we hit him, and we think he's going to be dead. But like I said, even after many years of experience, you have to slow yourself down and really look. And a lot of people don't have the luxury of going back and looking at video to see where that arrow hit. And I thought he was broadside. He was actually slightly quartering to. So that's number one. Number two would be what you said. Well, actually, I'm going to put what you said number two. You trail too soon. And that's going to go back to old school advice that we were given as kids, people my age, from old timers, was always give a deer, no matter what, unless you see it go down, give it an hour at least before you assess the situation. And I know that we've dealt with that some over the years where we make the shot, we feel real confident, and you might hear the deer crashing, but you're not positive that he went down, and lo and behold, you jump that deer. And that is a recipe for disaster if you get out there too quickly.
Yeah, it reminds me of our Wisconsin hunt in, I think, like 2018. Yep. It's that deer that you shot quartering away, and it basically went through the entire body cavity of that deer, like in its right hind, out its left shoulder.
Yep.
And that was probably still to this day the longest, hardest blood trail that I've ever been on. And we did bump it once that night. Ended up in a grid search the next morning. We finally found him, but it goes to show that even if you do look at the footage and you think, oh, there's no way that deer is dead or alive, rather, I'm sorry, you still don't know, because the element that is always surprising is their will to live. So if that arrow just barely misses the lungs by, an eighth of an inch or something, those things can still live, no matter how much pain they might be in.
That's excellent points. And you actually touch on two of the other five. One is making assumptions, and number two is the other one is giving up too easy. Making assumptions, what I did in that situation, as David said, that arrow hit really far back right in front of the flank, went right through the deer and popped out here. We didn't have much of a blood trail because of that, because we really didn't have an exit wound. So I made an assumption, there's not that much blood. That's a huge assumption people make. There's not that much blood. Or the other assumption was, he couldn't have went too far because, I know that arrow went completely through him. Well, a couple things going on there. A lot of internal bleeding. We know that a deer has to bleed almost 30% for it to die, which I always use this example. Think of like 5 of these water bottles full of blood. Well, that's not always going to be on the ground, so that's an assumption. And then the other thing, and that's, I think, one of the first times I had dubbed you Eagle Eye was, man, you get out there and you're looking, and the blood is not easy to find, and you really have to focus. You get those little leaves that look like blood, or those little, especially this time of year. I don't know what it is. It's some type of forb. Turns red. You can't find blood, and you think, there's just not enough blood. Oh, he's fine. I didn't kill him. I must have missed him. I must have just, clipped this, that, the other thing. It's really difficult to put an arrow through a deer and not kill it,
right?
Or even put it through the chest cavity and not kill it. So if I have to re-say, okay, so knowing the basics, trailing too soon, giving up too easy. I'm going to blow through these because we've got 3 top 5 lists here. Making assumptions. The other one I would add under making assumptions is trying to think like a deer. Don't do that, because once you try to think like a deer, that deer wouldn't have gone through there, or this is wide open, he went through there, or oh, he's wounded, he's going to go to water. Well, sometimes yes.
I find a lot of my deer at water.
And you know why that is?
Because
I set you up for this.
Because they're thirsty.
Well, kind of.
Well, I mean, they're.
I'm asking for a biological answer. You're back in school.
Yeah, I know, but that's your job.
Hypovolemic-
You've explained it to me before.
Hypovolemic shock, which is a loss of blood volume.
Mm-hmm.
And it's actually a good sign. Mostly, there's no absolutes. There's absolutely a good sign if you see a deer going toward water.
Mm-hmm.
And hypovolemic shock can set in no matter what, but in a lot of cases, it's with a gut shot. And that's because just the volume is not there, and their bodies are working hospitals. I could get real geeky and tell you about the levels of vitamin K in their blood and the levels of B endorphin that are running through them when they're wounded, but that is why. But making assumptions, the assumptions though, like that one we trailed, it went through like a wide open field and then it went back into the woods and it kind of circled around. When a deer's wounded, like all bets are off. You don't know what that deer's going to do. So what you have to do is just follow the sign.
Well,
stay on it.
Is it safe to assume that if you know you gut shot a deer, after you give it 12 hours, is it safe to just find the nearest water source and check that first?
It's not a bad idea.
Yeah.
Especially if you're hunting like a creek bottom or something like that. It's not a bad idea. Especially, what I would say is always stay on the sign, never go off the sign.
Yeah.
So if you have blood, if never ever give up on a blood trail as long as you have blood. I don't care if it, and now it's going to go to number 5 on that list, is not having permission on the neighbors. Things we do wrong. Get that lined up in advance. And if you haven't got it lined up in advance, put your tail between your legs and get over there. Find whoever owns the land, because that is normally what ends our blood trails. Property lines ends our blood trails. But to answer your question, yeah, if all hope is, I don't want to say all hope is lost, but you're like, I think I gut shot this deer. I gave him the 12 hours, and that's actually going to be in my next top 5 list here. But give them that time. Don't trail that deer too soon.
Yeah, because for all you know, a gut shot deer could have stopped 100 yards bedded, still on your property. You go too soon, you bump them right onto the neighbors that you may not have permission on.
And then it's going to be over. Okay, yeah. So I listed those other guys who you never had the pleasure of meeting.
Nope.
Who do you think in my career was the person that I think is the best at trailing gut shot deer?
That you think?
Yeah, that I think, that I've experienced, that I've hunted with. This should be easy for you.
And I know this person?
Obviously. You would have to.
I don't know, that dog that helped find Noah's
deer. Dogs excluded. That's a whole nother universe. Dogs excluded. Works with us almost every day.
Oh, man, I don't know, because I mean, I know a lot of, like, you hunt with Bob Robb a lot.
Has a couple TV shows with us.
Bartilla?
Steve Bartilla is the best blood trailing person on gut shot deer that I've ever seen. And
he does hang out with dogs a lot, so maybe that's...
He's got a lot of dog in him. Is that what you're saying?
Yeah, he's got the sense like they do.
You know why I think he's the best that I've seen?
Why?
He doesn't break those rules. Steve does not, and I don't want to say he doesn't care, but he will not, if he knows that deer is gut shot, because you said, like what you just mentioned, if you gut shot a deer, invariably that deer is going to go a short distance before it beds.
Mm-hmm.
And Steve has taught me time and time again, if you give that deer enough time to die, which is going to die, there's no question about that, it's going to be dead either in that bed or very close to that bed.
Mm-hmm.
And that goes to one of these points, but that is something that I forget about the weather, forget about heat, forget about rain, forget about coyotes. And I know that I talk out of both sides of my mouth, because in my book I talked about that, about coyote concerns. It doesn't matter. If there's coyotes and they're going to find your deer, they're going to find your deer.
Yeah.
If it's warm, that deer's still going to need minimum 8, if not 12 hours to die. And if you get in there at 3, 4, 5 hours and you push it, forget it. You've jumped them. You're probably not going to catch up to them, and you're probably not going to find them.
Right.
It's as pretty cut and dried as that. That's one thing that I've learned. There are exceptions. I've shot deer. Again, I feel like Dr. Phil. I'm going to get to it. But on different types of intestinal or paunch shots, I have killed deer quicker, especially with like sever broadheads. Huge holes. Some have died quicker, but invariably a gut shot, if it's a straight up gut shot, you got to let that thing go. Okay.
Right.
So second top 5 list is the toughest. What are the 5 tough? This is for bow hunters. We'll have to do a gun hunting show later. What are the top 5? This is just random. Top 5 wounds to trail for a bow shot deer.
Top 5 wounds to trail. Top 5 hardest or
top 5
easiest?
hardest, most difficult.
Okay.
Not in any particular order, but I've got 5 of them.
Liver.
That's one. We'll talk about them all.
Yeah.
Do you want to try them all? Do you want to try to guess them all first, or should we go through them as you see them?
Well, I mean, a gut shot's pretty hard.
Yep, that's 2. 3 more.
Pretty, I don't know.
Well, gut. When you said gut, I got that in both intestines and paunch. Okay, so that's 3 out of 5.
Oh,
Okay. You got 2 more.
I'm pretty good at this.
Broken legs don't count.
I was like, what about a headshot?
Broken legs and headshots don't count in this list.
I mean, too high of shots are definitely difficult simply because they.
Okay, so I'm going to give you that one. That's a 1 lung shot.
Yeah, you clip the top of the lungs, you go through the backstrap or something. Those clot up really quickly.
And number 5 you're not going to get, but I'll give you a chance to guess it.
Number 5.
I don't think you and I have ever trailed one of these together.
Oh. Well, you made a lot of bad shots, so I feel like we would have had to have. I don't know. I want to say something like I don't know.
Should I give you a hint?
Yeah, like give me a quarter of the deer that it's in.
It's in the front quarter of the deer.
Front quarter.
Yep. And it does not involve the lungs or the heart.
Is it in front of the lungs and above the heart?
Kind of. Yes.
Okay. Well, whatever's there.
Trachea/esophagus.
I was going to say neck shot. Yeah.
Trachea.
We actually have.
Have we?
That doe in Wyoming.
Oh my gosh, yes we did.
Yeah. And spoiler alert, we found her alive the next day.
Yeah, we did.
So
and we
it
got
happens.
her. And we got her, and that was when, and you could actually, please don't roll that footage. I broke down hysterically because that was very, very emotional.
Mm-hmm.
So let's talk about that one first. So the top 5 hardest, again, you guys can add your own in the comments, but trachea, esophagus would be 1. Pure intestines would be 2. I'm going to explain that. Paunch would be 3. Excuse me. Liver would be 4, and 1 lung would be 5. Again, there's other ones, broken legs, things like that, muscle wounds. But let's go through these. Esophagus, trachea. Okay, trachea is a windpipe. Comes down. It's the base of the esophagus is what gets into the lungs. Mm-hmm. If you center punch that, which is very unusual, but it's happened. We did it in Wyoming. I think I've only had 2 or 3 in my entire career doing this. One was with a fixed blade broadhead. It was actually a Muzzy 3-blade, and that was about 30 years ago. And then that one was with a sever. What happens if you hit that trachea, the windpipe, the deer's going to die, but you don't have a ton of blood loss because where that arrow is coming through is coming basically straight through the neck, and you're missing the spinal column. And long story short, it could be a gruesome situation that you're going to have to get up and make a second shot. Hopefully you have an angle there where you're going to be able to catch something else to lead to more bleeding. But the advice there would be is if you suspect one, and how would you suspect it? Obviously, if you have a video guy recording it.
Right.
99.9% don't. The other thing that you could suspect is just the visual confirmation of where your arrow hit, or the big one for me on ones that I've shot and ones I've seen others shot would be white foam in the blood trail, and that is very common. If you see the white foam, you know you have some type of trachea hit, and that's basically just from that chemical reaction of that wound exiting out of the deer, and that's, like I said, pretty graphic. I'll keep it at that for
Yeah,
here.
I mean, esophagus, neck is never ideal, but, if you get lucky, like I did last year on my buck, I shot more forward my arrow. I just pulled it, and it completely severed his trachea from the front end.
I totally forgot about
he went, I mean, he didn't even run away. He just walked away, and it was just pouring out.
So you caught a vein coming through
something, yeah. He went
30
yards, and there was just spray everywhere. It was the best blood trail I've ever been on, but obviously not an ideal shot.
And probably one where you're like, what just happened?
Yeah, because I thought I missed him, because I'm like, well, he's not even running. He's just walking. He's just chilling. And then, of course, watch the film, and I just see he's just completely gushing out of his neck.
Yeah, I said, it's gruesome. You don't want that to happen, but you do this enough, you're going to have weird stuff happen.
Right.
Okay, let's go to pure intestines and paunch. That's 2 and 3. Pure intestines are the actual intestine, the large and small intestine. You center punch those, you're in for a long day and night.
Yep.
And a paunch shot is that's where you get all the googy matter, undigested food on your arrow. That's in front of the intestines. That one will die quicker. However, it's still going to be a very long day. I have, thank goodness for expandable broadheads that are sharp. I always say sever. I have shot rages in the past that have worked. I've shot NAPs in the past that have worked. I've shot other broadheads that have worked. It has to be sharp, and if it goes through the paunch, that, for all intents and purposes, you're looking at about half the time, I've found. Again, not set in stone. So you're looking at about 4 or 5 hours. If you 100% know that's a paunch, but normally you don't just get the paunch. You'll get like the lung in the paunch, the liver in the paunch. That arrow is coming through some type of angle. On a pure intestine shot, normally that's a broadside shot, completely broadside, that you just completely pull that shot and shot either, left or right, right through the back of the guts. That is very difficult. Again, 10, 12 hours at least. Let it go overnight. Even if you shot it in the morning, let it go to the next day. An interesting point there, David, was Becca had an angling shot on her deer. They weren't positive, so they let it go overnight, and that deer was fine, and it was 80 degrees here. Mm-hmm. It got down in the swamp. There's a microclimate down there. It was cool enough. They found the deer, and she said, okay, they did not save the inside tenderloins because, they let the deer go 12 hours. Mm. But at the end of the day, I know a lot of southern hunters, they're going to say, hey, listen, man, it's 90 degrees down here. Yeah, I know. There's different situations. But if you got to let that deer go, you've got a much better chance.
I'm a little biased here because of my profession and everything, but I kind of think that everybody, whether you're doing it for content creation or not, everybody should film their hunt one way or another. And it's really not that hard. You could just get a mount for your phone on your bow and film it just to, because imagine how much meat you could save or how many deer will be recovered more. It's so easy to do that I personally would just encourage everybody to just for the shot, just roll your phone on a mount on your bow or something, or on your stand.
It's a great great bit of advice.
Yeah.
I'd recommend it because, after all these years of doing it, that video confirmation of just where the arrow hit is so huge. Mm-hmm. And it oftentimes contradicts what we think.
Right.
Oh, I hit him perfect. That Wyoming buck, oh man, I'm shooting a crossbow. It's 440 feet per second, that 10 point. Mm-hmm. And it's like, oh, I did not hit him perfect. I hit him about 4 inches high.
Right. Or the opposite. You think you made a horrible shot and then you see that impact right in the perfect vitals and immediate confirmation. Let's go look for him.
And the other one too, we had a hunter last week who shot a deer that was facing him, and he's like, "Oh, I don't think I killed it," and he felt terrible about it. And we looked at the video. It's like, "No, you killed that deer."
Yeah.
Unfortunately, couldn't recover it because it did jump on a neighbor's, and the neighbor was not a state landowner that they couldn't get a hold of, which really sucks.
Right. And that goes back to your earlier point where it's like no matter how much you hunt, how much experience you got to be able to control yourself in the moment. And, obviously a straight on shot of a deer is never ideal, but you live, you learn, and you get better from there. So
yeah, and you do, and that's the thing. It's like
I say that because he's sitting right next to me.
I know we don't want to name names.
I don't know who you're talking about.
I have no idea who that is. But no, that's the thing. But the video confirmation, although it sucked that he didn't find the deer, he did have the. I looked at it. I will guarantee you, I will.
Yeah, that deer's dead.
I will put my reputation. That deer is 100% dead.
And at least that. I think he went after it a little early, bumped her onto private land, and that private land was a high-profile landowner who's very private and doesn't let people on the land. Therefore, he wasn't able to get her. So, sorry, Ian, but kind of a perfect example of all the things we're talking about.
It works out well for that.
Yeah.
Which is true. I can't remember. I was going to add to that, but I'm going to just finish off this list. Number 4 is a liver shot.
Yeah.
Tricky. When I put it in the toughest, a lot of guys will say, well, that's not that tough. It is if you don't know what you're doing. Liver shot, for people who haven't encountered it, is normally indicated by dark red blood that's almost opaque colored, like a maroonish color. Mm-hmm. It can be very speckly, depending upon where you are. It could be in snow or it could be in grass or whatever. It's usually not just big globs of blood. It peters out to speckles because that's kind of indicative almost of a gut shot hit, darker blood specks. But a liver shot that you got to understand is that liver sits to one side of the body, and you normally don't get a nice center punch. We think that with lungs too. You think, oh, I hit the lungs, and the lungs are this big. Well, they're concave, and there's actually lobes of them, and the liver's kind of the same way. It's this jellyfish kind of thing that's inside a deer. So even if you have a liver hit, it could be the nick of a liver. It nicked it, or it could have just caught a part of a lobe of the liver. Those liver shots, you almost got to treat them like gut shots. You got to give them at least 4 hours. If you have great blood that you know is liver blood, then you can kind of feel your way as you go along that trail. But they are tough. Deer's going to die. It's going to bleed out, and it's going to... Yeah, on the best center punch liver shots I've ever taken, it's still taking them 15, 20 minutes to die. And a deer can run 30 miles an hour. If you push that deer, it can go a long way.
Have you ever been on a blood trail that's like, because I know I have, you got phenomenal blood. It's red. You might even see a bubble or two, but it just keeps going.
That's in the next list. Yes. That's in the next list.
Like,
yes.
How far is too far to trail a good blood trail?
That we save that one because that's in the list called things that will fool you while blood trailing.
All right.
So the last one, which kind of goes to this.
You didn't share your list with me, buddy. So.
No, I didn't. The last one in this list of the hardest ones for bow hunting, in my opinion, is a one lung hit, which you referred to before. Mm-hmm. Hunting out of a tree stand, catching the back lobe of the lung, catching the front lobe of the lung, catching that arrow coming straight down through one lung or through the, as Brian taught us, the mediastatum, which I am just completely fascinated. Okay, guys, get geeky with me for a minute. You have the lungs, you have the diaphragm, you have the thing called the mediastatum, which is a membrane lining that separate. If you don't think God exists, study deer anatomy. Okay, study any animal's anatomy.
Study us. We're just like a sack of meat.
Study out. It separates the two lungs basically, and the diaphragm, so they can be almost like independent engines within this within this chassis. And so that one lung hit. One thing that we have not found proof on yet, but Brian is working on this, is that there could be a medical phenomenon where lung tissue I don't want to say it could heal itself, but it can shut itself off. And I think we already know that. So let's just say you hit one lung and you've got a broadhead going through there, and your broadhead isn't razor sharp, because if it is razor sharp, that thing's going to bleed and bleed and bleed. But let's just say you get through it and that seals itself off. One lung deer, we know that lung's not going to collapse necessarily, and the deer can go a long way. So that's why it makes it such a tough deer to travel, to follow. And we've been on those.
Yeah.
We've been fortunate to find nearly all of them.
Yeah.
I know Brad has trailed some that have gone for hundreds and hundreds of yards.
Right.
And I know some of you listeners have probably had, can share equal stories, but that is a very difficult, with archery. With gun, a little bit different. You've got so much disruption coming through there with a bullet that normally that trauma is going to lead to other things and cause that deer to die. But even still, that's a tough one to follow.
Right. I want to real quick just give a plug. If anybody doesn't know who Brian Johnson is, who Dan keeps bringing up, you probably shot into his targets. Ian, switch to camera 3.
Yep.
There's that anatomy deer right behind Dan's shoulder. He molded that. That's what he does. He creates targets for Reinhardt. And the anatomy thing is his passion, and he spends all of his personal money into his research just to try to discover the perfect shot to take a deer down ethically. And like, that's his life's goal, which is just, again, the guy is just a mad scientist when it comes to it all. He does more on his own for no real gratification other than helping hunters make ethical shots, which is actually just really cool.
Glory to God, because he's a huge Christian, and that's his life's mission.
Yeah, so look him up, Brian Johnson, the Anatomy Hunter.
AnatomyHunter.org, I think it is. Thank you, David, for that, because that is true. He is something that, I mean, we knew about each other, but I didn't know his level of geekiness on this until we actually had him here.
He's a bigger geek than you, man.
Wow, man. It's
a lot smarter, stuff.
Deer Talk Now is brought to you by Wildlife Research Center and the new Golden Rope Scent Rope Kit. The kit comes with 4 ounces of Golden Rope Scent Concentrate, 3 cable ties, and 3 scent ropes made of proprietary fibers meant to absorb the maximum amount of scent. Simply saturate the rope in your scent of choice, hang it from a branch, and watch the trail cam photos come flying in. For more information, go to wildlife.com. Okay, those are the toughest. We've got just enough time to do the last 5. And I'll put this list in the comments for you guys, and I want you to add your comments, because that's how we learn, is by sharing this. It's not my knowledge. It's not Brian's knowledge. It's all of our knowledge together, pulled together. You've got millions of data points that say, oh, I've never had that. Or actually, I did have that happen. Okay, things that will fool. I'm going to let you start this one because you just said it. Things that will fool you while bow hunting. The five top things that will fool you while bow hunting.
You mean while blood trailing?
I'm sorry, blood trailing. Yes.
Okay, so I've got obviously a really good blood trail that doesn't ever seem to stop. That's happened a couple times to me. Other times I can think of is like down from me. We're in Wisconsin. In Ohio, there's these like plants that got these red blotches all over their leaves. If you got a blood trail, just differentiating it is nearly impossible. Down in Texas, you got dirt and rocks. You hope to God that your blood falls on the rocks, because if it doesn't, you're probably not going to blood trail very well there, unless you got somebody who really knows the landscape and can smell the deer, which we know a few people like that, which is crazy cool. Other than that,
you mentioned one other thing. You said a trail that goes on forever and it's got some bubbles in it,
and it's got a little bubble in it. Yeah, so there you go, which is probably more that one lung direction, I would think.
Okay, so I'm going to attack this from one thing I didn't have on there was I was thinking more. Well, actually, no. Some of these should have been there. Soil and leaves. Let's talk about that for a minute. Texas, Oklahoma, Kansas, Missouri, other places I've hunted, Wyoming. It's very arid a lot of times during hunting season, and it's almost like a sandy-like soil. And that blood just, it evaporates. Mm-hmm. I mean, it's just like poof. You're like, you just completely poleaxe this deer. You think he should be laying there dead. And I'm like, I have no sign whatsoever. Those conditions can really make it difficult, and they can really fool you into thinking like, I must have not hit this deer very well. There's no blood. The leaf situation, I think everybody probably has that to a certain extent with either foliage that tricks you into thinking that's blood, or pine needles is just about as bad as dry soil, because if you've ever been on your hands and knees, and I know you have, trailing blood in pine needles, it's next to impossible. Grass, swamps, grass, even like ryegrass in a field, very difficult. That will fool you. But to your point was which number 3 on my list of things that will fool you is bubbles in the blood, especially on a long trail. That could be a one lung hit. A lot of times it is. But if that trail keeps going on and on and on, normally I start asking myself, what else could be going on here? And are the bubbles really prominent, or am I just seeing a couple of them? Because remember, bubbles in the blood indicates oxygen, but it's not necessarily from the lungs. It could be, I've seen bubbles in gut blood. I mean, there's going to be oxygen in there at some point. So you kind of got to really, like I say, let that trail teach you something, especially if you're not finding beds. If the deer keeps going, then is the blood starting to peter out? Is it a muscle wound? Is it a broken bone wound? If there's a lot of bubbles in it, you're probably dealing with some type of lung hit. But I wouldn't just blanketly say, well, I definitely got the lungs because there were bubbles in it. That's not necessarily true.
Right. I think the worst feeling is when you're on a blood trail for 100 yards. Blood is great, and then it just stops.
Yep.
Just completely stops. You have no idea where the deer went. There's no, sign of circling and dying, nothing like that. It just stops because it clotted up.
Ian, remember the one, I'm going to get Ian in here. Remember that nice buck I shot a couple years ago? I hit him through the brisket.
Yeah.
And that was a prototypical blood trail like that.
Yep.
Blood went on and on and on and on. He never stopped. He never bedded. And eventually started petering out to a drop here, drop there. We had a couple bubbles in that.
And it just stopped.
And that wasn't anywhere through the chest cavity.
Right.
Well, actually, it kind of went in behind the arm and it came out on the same side. So that was something that really fooled. It's very frustrating.
What about no man's land? Does it exist?
Oh, God. Okay, this is gonna drive the video.
Yeah, I mean, because
this is gonna drive the video because I know all you guys are gonna argue with me. I say it does not exist.
Okay.
There is no.
And I think Brian Johnson agrees, right? He had the same argument.
Look at anatomy. There is no dead space. There is no space. It's physically impossible. If you look at a deer's anatomy, real anatomy, go to anatomyhunter.org. He's got a deer, real deer, however you want to say it, skinned out. That thoracic cavity comes all the way up to the top of the spine. I mean, to where the spine meets the chest. You know what I'm saying?
Mm-hmm.
The only way to get an arrow through where you're not disrupting the thoracic cavity at some point would be breaking one of the dorsal fins on the spinal column and somehow putting that arrow through there. Can it be done? I'm sure it can be done because I'm sure people have done it. But is that no man's land?
Yeah, because that's on top of the spine. When I first
the dorsal fins come down.
Oh, just kidding. Yeah.
Well, they do go up and down. If you look at them, there's one that comes up and there's some that curve down.
So I don't know. I guess, is there any way in which you could shoot right under the spine as the deer is exhaling?
No.
And miss the lungs?
No. Not get through the thoracic cavity. You can get through the meat of the spine, or what we call the spine, which would be the spinal column.
Right.
But it has nothing to do with exhaling. That's what people think. They think, well, the deer exhaled, and now there's no dead space. That thoracic cavity is attached by membrane to the dorsal portion of the spine. But I'm going to give you I'm going to concede that you're not crazy. You're not saying like that arrow didn't go through the deer, but it did not go through the thoracic cavity. Ergo, it did not disrupt where the lungs are.
So you're saying that it just hit one of the dorsal.
If it got
fins.
through one, if it could have got through. Let's say there is a space between them, because if you look at the rib cage like that, let's just say I can't really.
And that's obviously not enough damage to partially cripple the deer.
No, because if that happened and the deer ran off, with a gunshot, the deer's going to drop just from the shock.
Yeah.
With a broadhead, it could go through, not sever the spinal column, because the spinal column's like that and it's encased in that bone.
Mm-hmm.
So if you didn't actually crack the spinal column and you went underneath the spinal column, and people say, what's the difference? There's a big difference. You could potentially get that arrow underneath the spinal column, and it's basically going through meat. It's got to be a 1 in a million thing, because if it's severing those dorsal fins, that deer's going to drop.
Mm-hmm.
Could the deer get up again? Yeah, it could, because it did not cut the spinal column. The spinal column is going to render that deer useless. It can't move.
Mm-hmm.
But the arrow did not get through the thoracic cavity, which is the biggest thing that I think most people don't understand, is that they think, well, there was that, they want to think that they killed it. You didn't kill it, because if it would have disrupted the thoracic cavity, you would have killed it.
So in that instance, what kind of blood trail are you looking at? Just a little meat on the arrow?
You'll see that. You'll see a lot of blood. Normally the first 50 yards, 50, 75 yards. And I know people are going to send me pictures. Well, we shot this one during bow season, then we shot that deer again during gun season. I've seen that happen. I've actually seen cases of arrows going through deer, and the deer survived, and they're like, well, what do you chalk that up to? And it's like, well, I'm not, I don't know. I'm not God. I don't have every scenario, but.
We have a doe on Brad Rux's camera like 2 years ago where an arrow it was a gunshot, went straight through, like your perfect shot, right behind the shoulder, center mass, and that deer was alive like the next year, and it had like.
There is
it was crazy.
Weird stuff.
Yeah.
With deflections, we've seen deflections where we saw one last year in Wyoming, where that arrow went in right behind the arm, and that thing kicked. I've seen guys that have had boomerangs where their arrow went in and it kicked out and it came out on the same side.
Yeah, and
the deer survived. And Brian actually showed us some where the arrow went in, it got between the hide and the ribs and came out. Mm-hmm. And then you think, and I'm not saying that all the cases are like that, but you'll see cases where you think you put it in somewhere else, and then it came out somewhere else far back. Also, I do attribute, I don't like to blame equipment, but I do attribute a lot of the weird stuff that we see to very dull broadheads. Yeah. And when I say dull, you could cut yourself with it, but it's not scary sharp, as Bob Robb says. Scary sharp, like you nick yourself and you're like, crap, I got to get a compress on it. That's the kind of sharpness that you have. Mm-hmm. There are weird situations, but to answer your question and belabor the point, I personally don't think there is a no man's land in the way that people portray it, as they're saying. Biology is biology. There is no dead space. There's no 3-inch space between the spine and where the lungs or where the thoracic cavity starts.
Right.
And the lungs are attached. They're not individual. They're not footballs inside that are going like this. They're attached to that membrane. Okay. That was 1 out of 5.
And we welcome all the comments that want to disagree.
Please do. Please tell me I'm an idiot and tell me that you know otherwise.
You're an idiot.
That's fine.
Just kidding.
That's fine. I want to hear your things.
This is the only place I get to do that.
I want to see your pictures and videos. It is. Okay. Other things that will fool you by blood trailing. Fool you while blood trailing. David, take a guess. We said bubbles in blood.
Bubbles in blood.
Some of these we've talked about.
I gave you all mine off the top of my head.
Okay, I'm going to start with number 1, the blood amount. And you kind of talked about that, but it's like, oh my gosh, there was so much blood, this deer should be dead by now. Mm-hmm. Or, oh my gosh, there's not hardly any blood. I didn't kill him. So many things can happen. There's so many different variables. There can be internal bleeding. There can be fat or guts or something plugging the wound, the exit wound normally. There could be no exit wound. We see that.
Also depends, I think, on the broadhead, right? Because I've been on hunts where certain broadheads were used that expand once they enter the deer.
With the long ferrules.
Yeah. Incredibly long pinhole. And that's all you end up having is just this tiny little pinhole entrance. And if you get no exit, it's all internal bleeding.
Right. That can fool you big time.
Massively.
The other thing I need to talk about broadheads, and this is another one that should drive some good comments. I personally have never seen a case where people say, well, the broadhead never opened. I have never, ever seen that, ever. And, I take that back. I have never seen it on a modern expandable broadhead. Within the past 15 to 20 years, I've never seen one like that. They do open, where they say, well, it didn't open until it got in there. If you skin that deer out and looked at it, you're not gonna find a pencil hole. Again, prove me wrong. If the blades broke, I guess that'd be a different situation. I've not seen that. Normally, what I've seen with mechanicals is they're just not sharp. And how do you know that? You have to test them. Stamped, if you know the manufacturing processes of broadheads, a lot of cheap broadheads, I'm not mentioning any product names, but cheap broadheads, it's a stamped process where they stamp the blade out of a machine. It's like a tool and die machine or whatever that stamps that blade out, and they're spit out on a conveyor belt. And to your own test, you're like, oh, that's pretty sharp. But then if you get a really sharp broadhead, and like I said, it scares the crap out of you, and you know that's the difference. And that's the difference between the amount of blood. Just think about cutting yourself with a piece of glass or cutting yourself with a knife that you pulled out of the kitchen drawer.
Yeah.
You cut yourself with a piece of glass, you're going to bleed, and that's what your broadhead needs to be.
Well,
So
I was
the blood
personally,
amount will fool you.
I was baptized in severed broadheads just by working here, and I then came across rages, and I really don't stray away from those two.
There's so many good broadheads out there.
Yeah.
There's so many good broadheads, and especially the guys who are shooting. If you want the sharpest broadheads, they're the cut on contacts.
I did use an NAP last year.
There's
first
no.
time. That was pretty
Talk to Ted Nugent. He's
Yeah.
still shooting Magnus. That he sharpens himself.
Yeah, he resharpens his broadheads,
Yes.
So, yeah, anybody who says you can't do that,
Fred Bear
talk
taught
to
him
Ted.
that, and there's actually video of him doing it with a stone. Insanely sharp.
Yeah.
Okay, amount of blood will fool you. The color will fool you. We talked about that. Bright red, pink, dark red, opaque, whatever. Until you've got enough experience, I'd say don't worry about the color. Just worry about finding the blood. And that blood is going to teach you a lot. The more trails you get, blood trailing is like shooting free throws. The more practice you take, the better you're going to get at it.
Yep.
Deflections, we talked about. Deflections, especially, I found, because I've shot a lot of crossbows in the past few years, you will get deflections. I don't care how fast that arrow is going, or that bolt, if you want to call it that. You're going to get deflections. Once an arrow hits a bone or hits a rib or is a weird angle, like a really severe quartering, you're going to get deflections, and that will fool you as far as the shot placement, and it's also going to fool you, well, in connection with that is what you hit, what you actually took out on that deer coming through. The deflections will fool you. And the last one is distance. Don't get in there and say, oh, we trailed this deer a mile already, he should be dead, or whatever. Deer they're built to survive. And they can run fast. And if you push them, they're going to run fast, and they're going to put on a lot of distance. And even if you don't push them and you shoot them, they're going to run 400 yards across the field in 5 seconds. So don't let distance dictate anything, and property lines is like, well, he jumped on the neighbors. Well, have that in place beforehand.
Right. I mean, it's just absolutely crazy. Like, can you imagine if a arrow with a severed broadhead went through your ass and out your opposite side shoulder, you ain't making it a foot.
I wouldn't make it to my office 10 feet from here.
Right, which is just crazy to see that happen over and over and over again with these deer.
Do you want to know what would be a cool correlation would be a deer. Have you ever studied? This is just bizarre. This, you know me, because I get on these YouTube rabbit holes. Have you ever seen the videos of the strength of a gorilla?
No, but I can imagine.
They can like basically pick up a car and throw it, and that's a wild animal. Like when they've get, and that's how a deer is when it's wounded. When I say it's a working hospital, it is a chemical facility that is running through that animal. It's a prey species that is programmed to survive. And just like that gorilla is going to rip the steel bars off a thing to get out, or a grizzly bear, there's a video of grizzly bears ripping open these trailers that you're like, how in the hell did they do it? Mm-hmm. Because and that's what a deer has surging through its body when, like you said, you take an arrow and you shoot it through it, and it's like, how in the hell did that thing run 440s?
Yeah.
We're thinking in our little feeble minds where it's like, well, that's 4 property owners away, you know? And it's like, deer's not thinking in that way. Deer's thinking is like, how much distance can I put on me and whatever the hell shot this thing through me right now?
Really makes you appreciate our brain ability, because that's really the only thing that sets us apart. Otherwise, we'd be living in Planet of the Apes. You know.
You're right.
So
you're right. So distance, don't let distance fool you. It is, it can be I'll just repeat these: the blood amount, the color, the lack of or presence of bubbles, deflections of an arrow, and distance. Now you're going to have weird things. When I talk about deflections, you have weird things like a broadhead sometimes breaks, an arrow sometimes breaks.
or you kill 2 animals at the same time.
You kill 2. What were those things?
Emus?
Rhea.
Or Rheas.
Birds.
So, okay,
we
real
don't
quick.
have video of it. I
Quick
wish we
story. So Dan and I are down in Texas. Where was it? What was that place called?
did. It was called
Lazy CK.
Lazy CK.
Lazy CK Ranch.
Terry
And-
Quinn. Yeah.
Yeah. Dan's down there. I'm filming somebody else in the industry because I'm like, we're not hunting deer, so Dan hunting Rheas doesn't really work. With
It's like an
deer hunting
ostrich,
TV.
kind of. It's a mini ostrich.
So I let Dan go out by himself, and Dan goes hunts these Rheas, and his guide pulls him up to a couple little field, and this is obviously secondhand story, but
You got it all right so far.
there's 2 Rheas in the field, and they're staggered. One is, 20 yards in front of you?
20, and the other one is about almost 40.
40, but a little bit further in behind.
But they're not lined up. One is like
Right, they're staggered.
15 yards, you know.
So Dan's got his crossbow. He puts it on a sticks. He shoots the one at 20, and immediately both of them drop. That arrow went into the one, deflected off of the shoulder blade or something, and perfectly went into the other Rhea that was standing an additional 20 yards to the northwest away.
Yes. It would be like if you're in a room and one was on one side of the room and one was on the other side of the room, but one was closer toward you this way.
That is my biggest regret as a producer, is not getting that on camera. Even sending a GoPro with you would have been amazing.
It would have been amazing, and I would have never believed it had it not happened to me.
I still don't really
Now, if
believe
that can happen on a bird, what can happen with a deer? A big 250-pound buck, you know?
I don't know if they'd both drop that quickly, but
I don't think
you
they
might
would.
hit them.
I've actually shot, short sidebar. I've shot 2 deer with an arrow once myself, and I've seen it happen at least 2 or 3 other times. For me, I'll tell you this quick story. This was 30 years ago. I was bow hunting at my first place that my dad built in the house, and the neighbor next to me let me hunt his field. He had 20 acres behind us, and I wanted to go out and fill a doe tag. And that was back in the day where, you know, we had to rush and get to work by 8 o'clock. So it was early season.
Now he sleeps until 10.
Now I sleep until, no, I don't. It was like early morning, I don't know, 6:30 in the morning, gets light out. Here comes a doe and a fawn, and it's September. And big doe, she steps in front of me, and I'm shooting my Matthews. I think it was a MQ-32, that little first bow they had. I shoot the deer. I'm not paying attention to it. I just watch, boom, the doe mule kicks, she runs, and she falls about 50 yards. And I'm great, awesome. You know, I get down, go over, look at my deer. I drag her back to the house, which was kind of a long drag, and hang her up in the garage. And it's I took a shower, got to work. I was to work by 8 o'clock. And so later, it was at lunchtime. I'd always take my lunch at 11 o'clock. And I only lived 5 minutes from the office then. So I get back, I'm eating my sandwich. I'm like, I really should go back and get my arrow, which I hadn't done because it's on the neighbors. I don't want to leave an arrow there. And I walk back and I pick up the arrow, and I'm like, just for whatever reason, I'm like, she only went 50 yards, but I wanted to see what the blood was like. I was writing an article for the equipment annual at the time. And I'm like, I want to see, I think it was a Sullivan interlock that I shot that year. And I look, and there's the arrow, and the blood trail's going that way. I'm like, wait a second, there's blood over here. And there's blood there and there and there. It's going the opposite way. So I follow that blood trail, and here it was a buck fawn, dead 50 yards away. That arrow went, and he must have.
Another buck fawn goes down by Dan Schmidt.
Another one bites the dust.
Here's a quick sidebar. Dan Schmidt is the only person who's hunted with the Drurys and Ted Nugent and killed buck fawns at both.
Yes, that is like a Caitlin Clark record right there.
Yeah,
the only one.
He wasn't invited back.
That's right.
I'm kidding. Ted said you can come back.
Ted loves me. I still text him every day. But anyways, that was two deer with one arrow. And I've seen that happen other times, but I was so laser focused on that doe, I never saw that buck fawn standing like literally right next to her. And that was it. Okay, well, that was a pretty good podcast. Thank you, David.
Wait, I got one more subject.
Okay.
So, just a question. Came to me that one other thing that could go wrong on a blood trail is too many people.
Oh my gosh, how did I forget that?
Too many people going ahead and doing this and that. So just to people,
that should be a topic. I mean, that should be a podcast in and of itself.
Yes. So to people who are new to it, how many people is enough? And what's the general practice? What would you advise how they do it?
2 people. That's it. You and one other person. And if you don't have a lot of blood, I am adamant about this. Too many cooks spoil the soup when it comes to blood trailing. You cannot focus. 2 people. Okay, so I'm going to say if you're new to bow hunting or deer hunting in general, you find somebody who is a seasoned blood trailer to help you. And that person follows the blood, and you stay at the last blood. And you do not change from that. And to go with this, you don't walk on the, I can't believe I forgot this, but you don't walk on the blood, and you and all you guys I've helped teach you this, is if you're standing by the blood, you don't stand on the blood, you stand off to the side of the blood. And you mark it. Normally what I do is I just take my boot and I make a mark in the dirt. Or if you've got like toilet paper, you could put mark it that way. But you have to stay off the blood trail completely. This is a CSI investigation because you have to a lot of times come back. A lot of times the deer will circle back. And if you're walking on that blood and messing it up and making noise and talking, there's no time for talking out loud. You do it in whispers, because you don't know if that deer's still alive. But that is critically important. Critically important, and I will not let more than one other person go with me on a blood trail because you can mess it up. You can step on the blood, especially if it's like little just drips and drops and you don't have a lot to follow. Before you know it, you're like, where are we? Where did it go? I don't know. I didn't trail it. I didn't mark it. So a lot of times you can actually see, okay, he came this way. Then you can make some educated guesses. Well, he either went this way or this way. And you just keep piecing it along that way. Great point to bring up, David.
At what point would you switch to a grid search?
Grid search is after you've exhausted all efforts and you've lost the blood. If you have the blood, you stay on it. If you lose it, and now you're getting to that point where it's the next day and it's hot and you've given it 12 hours, then you enlist as many people as you can. And that grid search basically, in short, is you take that section of land that you're looking on. Everybody spaces themselves out relatively close, within 20 yards, and you just walk. Okay, we're walking straight line this way. Then we're going to stop, and we're going to shift over 20 yards and go this way, and then you're going to go the opposite way. And you will find, just Google that on our website. You're going to find guys who can do that extraordinarily efficiently, especially on gut shot deer that they can't find. But then you get into the whole thing today with
Drones.
and dogs, and
Yep.
there's so many good people out there that are doing both services. And here's a shout out to anybody who hires a dog guy to help find your deer.
Mm-hmm.
They can't legally take money from you. My goodness, pay those guys. Give them a very
Is that
good tip.
everywhere, or is that just here in Wisconsin?
I know it's here in Wisconsin. I think it's everywhere because
Okay.
it is a natural resource.
Yeah.
But if they show up, don't be cheap. My goodness, especially if you're hunting and you shot a big buck. What is
Yeah.
that worth to you?
Right.
And a guy comes and he finds it, and we've seen him in 5 minutes.
Uh-huh.
Don't be cheap and give him $20 or a case of beer. I mean, I don't know. To me, that is like
Unless it's your brother.
it's an invaluable service.
Right.
Drones. Have you dealt with people finding them with drones?
No, I mean we've talked
seen
to
the
that
videos.
drone deer recovery
Yeah.
guy. It's phenomenal what they do. It's really cool, and I know that a lot of them, Ian actually I think knows the laws a little bit more than I do. But there's certain states where I don't know, like if they even find it, they're not allowed to
Yes. They can only say, here it is, but you got to go get it now.
Yeah,
Like,
something.
they
like
can give you
that.
coordinates
I
or something.
forget.
Yeah.
but it's.
I've
mean-
never had a guy use a drone. I've had a guy use a helicopter.
If it's legal in your state, absolutely do it. It's
Yeah.
cool. It's great. If you can hire somebody who's got like the thermal drones, those obviously are going to work a hell of a lot quicker than if you just got like a little, DJI Phantom or something of your own. But, yeah, I mean, I'd do it.
Oh yeah, I mean that's we've seen, like you said, there's a lot of guys that do it, that have those services, and almost every area that I know has dogs, and your word gets out. Once there's a good guy, a good dog guy, it's worth his weight in gold. And with those, that's why when I say walking on eggshells, because you can mess it up for the guy with the dog. If you're out there with 3 or 4 people doing all this stuff, the dog's rates go down because that dog is dealing with all sorts of other scents, and it makes it really difficult on them. Shane Simpson, you've seen his videos. We've had him on the podcast.
Yeah.
Phenomenal. I mean, those dogs, once they teach those dogs how to do it, it is just something beautiful to watch because they're really good at it.
Yeah.
All right. Well, that gives us enough for an hour. We probably have more than that, but we want to thank everybody for watching. Again, like and subscribe. We appreciate you. And it's every Thursday. Wherever you're following deer and deer hunting, you can find these podcasts and also watch them on the video platforms. For David Gilane and Ian Sanchez, I am Daniel Schmidt. We appreciate you, and we'll catch you next Thursday for another episode of Deer Talk Now.
Peace out.